All right, everyone. Tyler King here with the Denver Gazette alongside Matt Smith of 104.3 The Fan in Denver. Here after Colorado's 28-10 loss here at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln. First off, this is my first time here, Matt. This is a pretty cool stadium. I'm a Big Ten guy. I went to Penn State, so I've been to the Big House, been to Columbus. So obviously, I've been to Happy Valley a bunch of times. This is a pretty cool stadium. I'm sure you've been here before. So
I've actually never been here
really?
before. This is my first time here too, and the environment lived up to the hype. From the drone show to everybody staying here in warm-ups. Unbelievable place to watch a football game. Just wish, Tyler, we had gotten a better one to watch tonight.
Yeah, it got out of hand pretty quickly. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the Oregon game last year. People were talking maybe this could turn into a Washington State, and it didn't get into that. It didn't get that bad, thankfully.
No.
But it kind of felt a little bit like the Oregon game last year. Obviously, CU was 3-0 going into that game. Oregon was pretty eager to put a beat down on them. I don't think this Nebraska team is that good, but they are pretty good. But how quickly did you feel like? What was the moment? Was it the pick six for Shedeur that you felt like this one's over? He's going to shot here.
It had to be the pick six, right? It just is frustrating because it's so many of the same issues that we keep seeing, and they can't get them corrected. And I think they thought they did. And I think the last 2 weeks, Tyler, has been like a learning moment for them too, of realizing that, oh no, we didn't actually correct a lot of this stuff. And that's a tough pill to swallow, especially when you've written as many big checks that they've written. Like, you've got to come through and pay it off. And it feels like 14 games into the Coach Prime era, they haven't figured out how to run the football.
Yeah.
And we've seen much worse CU teams be able to do that. Now, obviously, they don't have the talent that they have with Shedeur and Travis. But the fact of the matter is, to everybody who says that CU's 2-12 and 5, Shedeur and Travis and Jimmy, can you really dispute that based upon an effort like this? We know that's not true.
Yeah.
But it kind of feels like that. So, again, frustrating effort tonight from Colorado, and I expected more. I was wrong, too, about how they would come out and play. It just felt like they were never in this game, even though the defense did technically and mathematically hold them in it. From a competitive standpoint and an eye test standpoint, I never thought that.
Yeah, coming in, you feel like, okay, you're going to say the defense holds Nebraska at 21 points. Obviously, there's the pick six, so that's 7 of the 28 that they gave up. You feel like, and just like you look at the total yardage that they allowed, it feels like, okay, they're probably in this game, and you and I both thought they were going to be in this game. But just from what you were asking Coach Prime, and what I was, I feel like we feel the same way, that like this doesn't feel a whole lot different from last year, which is, like you said, if you feel like they thought they did, whether it was the new offensive line, whether it was Pat Shermer, whatever it was, it just feels like the same script a little bit that we saw in 2023.
It does, and the problem is, and what's frustrating is, they brought in a lot of weapons offensively. They're struggling to find different ways to get the ball to those guys. Like, it feels like when things go wrong, they default to Shedeur, save us, because they have nothing else to go to. And if you can't run the football, you're going to end up in a lot of bad situations. And you talked about, the pick six. Yeah, it was probably the pick six because you're down 2 scores now and you're in obvious passing situations in Nebraska's defensive line. And this was maybe the bigger concern to me with their front five group. Nebraska was getting pressure with 3 and with 4. Like, I don't know that they ever sent more than 5. Like, I don't even know that there was a cover 0 tonight look at all. They just straight up beat you one-on-one. And this was supposed to be the rebuilt offensive line. And it looks a lot similar to what we saw last year. So it's got to be a 10-alarm fire inside that building right now because, okay, the Big 12 title technically, didn't get affected tonight. But if you're talking about Big 12 title with this team right now, they're not thinking about that. Go beat CSU.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Tyler, a lot of concerns coming out of this one.
Yeah, obviously, I think that if you are going to take one positive out of this game, and Coach Prime was trying to be as positive as possible after the game, despite some clear frustration, both of his sons got banged up tonight, so I'm sure he was trying to put on a brave face. Shedeur seems like he'll be fine. He even spoke to us post-game. I don't think he would have if something was really wrong. But Shilo, he clarified later after the game that he doesn't know that it's for sure broken his forearm.
But it was in a cast. He broke his arm.
That's at least a couple weeks, maybe a couple months.
If I'm wrong, you could say it was me who said I was wrong.
Well, regardless, he's not going to be playing next week. We know that for sure. But like I said, if you're going to take one positive, I feel like Robert Livingston at least has shown that he's got the chops to make some halftime adjustments. Only 6 points allowed through 2 games in the second half. I mean, Nebraska did take their foot off the gas pretty clearly in the second half, but I think they would have liked to have made one more home run play or something like that just to give the fans something. But it's going to be a tall task because every week in the Big 12 is going to be a difficult playing against these offenses.
There's no layups. And we talked about it at the beginning of the year. Everybody was like, well, last year's schedule in the Pac-12, that was way harder. And I kind of didn't agree with that. Maybe you didn't have the Oregon, okay?
USC.
USC, but even USC was 7-5.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to have the baseline quality of opponent is raised this year. You don't have your Stanford, right? Washington State, even they beat the brakes off of you, but at the same time, that team wasn't that great.
No.
Like, it just wasn't. CU was in such a bad spot at that time. And what you can't afford is to end up where you were at the end of last season this year. Yeah. You have to demonstrate an ability to grow because, Tyler, if you can't do that with Shedeur and with Travis Hunter, who are you going to do that with?
Yeah.
And I think that for the people who are coming out against the program saying you can't build a team through the portal and you can't do this, you can't do that, like what argument did CU put up to make that, against those notions, really, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Like, all of that stuff is probably in bounds.
Yeah.
And I think the concerning part is they don't have answers. So this is going to be a fine-tuned tooth comb situation where you gotta evaluate everything, man.
Yeah. Obviously, next week going into CSU, they struggled a little bit tonight with Northern Colorado. They ended up pulling away late, but Torrey Horton, their star wide receiver, could be out. I mean, I feel like tonight might be the last time they face a defense like that in Nebraska, but I feel like it's going to be shootouts from here on out. It just feels like, even with some of the defensive progress they've made, it's going to be, they're going to have to put up 35, 40 points to win the rest of the way.
Oh, I thought, and that's a really good point, because I thought headed into tonight, you had to score 40 to win. Yeah. Because I thought the defense was going to struggle. I would have never thought the offense would have struggled to this degree that they did tonight, and that's super concerning. So, I mean, shootouts would be great, but, like, does this have lingering effects? Because from a confidence perspective, you'll remember, new defensive coordinator Robert Livingston, during camp this year, said that he still sees last year in some of these guys' eyes. What do you think tonight did?
Yeah.
Probably triggered a lot of those same feelings because it was very reminiscent to the Oregon game.
Yeah.
Like, at one point, they're down 21-0, and then they started to put a drive together, and then, you go for a field goal for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Like, again, the coaching miscues tonight were glaring, and
there was even some more clock management that we saw at the end of the first half. There was some weird clock management of just kind of letting the half expire. Basically, you said it was reminiscent of the Broncos in Seattle a couple years ago.
The decision to kick the field goal was egregious. It was one of the most humiliating coaching decisions I've seen made by a CU coach. To put Jace Feely in that spot when the longest kick that's ever been made in the stadium was 57 yards, to let him try a 61-yard field goal. Jace Feely can't get it to the end zone on kickoffs. Like, that's just bad coaching. It just is. And so until you can clean some of that stuff up and you can protect your quarterback and you can run the we're starting to go and it's just not a great team right now. And that's the problem.
Yeah, like you said, it just feels like we keep coming back to this last year all over again. Bad on the offensive line. The defensive line, I think, has gotten a little bit better, but at times they're still getting gashed for chunks on the ground. The special teams is still really bad. I was really surprised they didn't go out and try to get a different kicker this offseason because it felt like they needed one, and they brought back the two that they had, and it still seems like that's a problem. Coaching, like I said, clock management is still a problem. It's just a repeat of the same thing, and it's got to get fixed quickly because CSU is not going to be a cakewalk. I mean, last year that team should have lost to that team last year in Folsom, and then you got the Big 12 coming up after that. I mean, you got Baylor coming to Folsom Field. I don't think Baylor's that great, but then you got to go right to UCF. That's going to be a really, really tough game. I mean, like you said, there are no layups on this schedule, and they've got a lot of issues. They're very familiar, and they've got to get them corrected really quickly.
I don't know how you do it. But it's one foot in front of the other, and I think it starts really with going, okay, the way we're doing things clearly isn't working. It's not, and I gotta pull the thumb instead of be pointing the finger, And Coach Prime stopped himself from throwing his whole offensive line under the bus.
It seemed like he was wanting to.
But he kind of did it.
Yeah.
And you know what? As a coach in that situation, it's the same. We're 14 games in. That's where, hey, what can I do? And Tyler, they hired a lot of first-time coaches. They hired a lot of first-time coaches. You're going to have growing pains, and you also have first-time coaches who may or may not know how to adjust and correct some of the issues. Like, we're going to see. So I am very nervous about what the rest of the year looks like. I'm not nervous about next week. Yeah. I think they'll be able to regroup for next week. I hope, Tyler, if I don't want to go there. I'm going to be confident in saying that I think that they can regroup for next week, but that's kind of like blind faith right now.
Yeah.
And because I don't think CSU is very good. I mean, quite frankly, I don't. However, I don't know. They ran for 100 yards against Texas, their starting running back. I don't know. That kid's probably going to have a pretty good day against, I don't know. Their run defense has been better. The point is that you're right. A lot of it is the same from last year, and you don't have a lot of time. You just don't. And you got to get it fixed.
Yeah, you don't want to get too big picture like week 2 of the season, but it is getting to the point where it's like, is Coach Prime really going to want to keep doing this after this season when he sees how hard it is to get there? Like, I mean, Matt Rule is a really good coach, and I think the praise that he has for Matt Rule is well deserved. He's rebuilt 2 really good programs quickly. Like, this is kind of what Matt Rule does in year 2 at places. He did it at Temple. He did it at Baylor. The Panthers thing was a whole different thing, but in college, Matt Rule knows what he's doing, and I don't know if Deion is interested maybe in putting the work that needs to get in, because I just don't think you can microwave an offensive line. I think you got on both sides of the ball. You can't microwave an offensive or defensive line. It takes time, and a lot of those guys that Nebraska has have been here for a while. They predate Matt Rule, like Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher, those guys that were eating up the CU offensive line. They've been here and they've been developed. And who's the longest tenured player on either offensive line? It's a couple of guys that have been here for 2 years, whether it's Arden Walker, Shane Cokes, just guys that have been here for 2 years. I mean, it just feels like it's going to be hitting another reset button at the end of the year. And how many times can you do that? Like I said, I don't want to get too big picture only week 2, because this could all change in a couple weeks if they go on a winning streak. But it just feels like we're headed down the same path that we were last year. And I don't think to that same drastic measure of 4-8, but all the preseason talk of we can compete for the Big 12 title, we can compete for the playoff, just feels so far-fetched right now, even if the Big 12 as a whole doesn't seem all that impressive. Like, I don't know, name one team you feel really good about through 2 weeks from the Big 12. Maybe Utah, but like even then, Cam Rising got hurt today, and who knows what his status is going to be. So there's going to be opportunities there, but can they win close games? They didn't do a ton of that last year either.
And I think that's the problem, right? It's you don't want to overly criticize and overreact to one game, but the sample size we have is 14 games now. Yeah. So until they correct some of those things week to week to make it not look like
5 and 9
year,
is not.
I think it's very fair to have these concerns. I think it's very fair. And moving forward, I'll say this about CSU. You go into CSU going, oh, well, Shedeur throw the ball 500 yards, you have 4 touchdowns. You're going to fall into a trap that you shouldn't. You've got to work on running the football in Fort Collins. Like, I don't care if it's like, oh, well, the game dictates. No. Like, if you don't accomplish that, then you're just setting yourself up to fail in the future. So these are all signs to look out for. And again, Kansas, Jalen Daniels throws 3 interceptions. They lose to Illinois. Yeah. Like, stuff happens. It does. But eye test says a lot, and eye test tells me they weren't ever competitive in this football game.
Eye test does tell me that I feel like Dallin Hayden's pretty good. He did get banged up at the end of the game. I don't know. Maybe we'll see more.
Yeah, 5 carries. I couldn't tell you. Yeah,
he had the one that went 17 yards. I was like, oh, there's some little juice that we haven't seen. It's just you said it. It just doesn't feel like they have many answers right now for these problems they got to solve. All right, that'll do it from us. Thank you to Matt for joining me here post game after Colorado's loss at Nebraska. We'll be back next week with full coverage heading into the Rocky Mountain Showdown.